Starting over can feel like admitting you failed. It can feel like all the time, money, effort, relationships, plans, and years you invested were wasted. So people stay. They stay in jobs they have mentally left. They stay in relationships that no longer feel healthy. They stay committed to plans that no longer fit who they are. They keep forcing businesses, routines, goals, and identities that clearly are not working anymore. Not because the current path is good, but because starting again feels worse. But what if starting over is not the same as starting from zero? What if the experience you gained, the mistakes you made, the skills you built, and the clarity you earned all come with you? And what if the bigger risk is not starting over? What if the bigger risk is spending another 5 years protecting a decision you already know needs to change? Today, we speak on the truth about starting over, when it makes sense, when it does not, and how to rebuild without throwing away everything your past has already taught you. Welcome to the Welz Project. I'm Welz, and this is Season 1, Episode 4. This channel is built around truth, growth, resources, and real talk. The purpose here is not to tell you what to believe. It is to give you ideas, questions, and practical frameworks that help you think more clearly about your own life. We've already talked about changing your mindset and breaking repeating patterns. Sometimes the next step is not fixing the path you're on, it's recognizing when it may be a time to choose a different one. Because sometimes growth means improving what you already have. Other times, growth means admitting that a chapter is over and giving yourself permission to begin again. That can be difficult because people often treat starting over like failure. But sometimes starting over is what happens when you finally stop lying to yourself about what is working. But sometimes starting over is what happens when you finally stop lying to yourself about what is working. By the end of this episode, I want you to have a practical way to decide whether something in your life needs repair, adjustment, or a real restart. I also want you to understand how to begin again without convincing yourself that everything you did before was wasted. Let's get into it.
One of the biggest thoughts that keeps people stuck is, if I start over, I lose everything. Sometimes there are real losses. You may lose money. You may lose a title. You may lose a routine. You may lose access to certain people. You may have to give up comfort, seniority, familiarity, or the feeling that you already know what comes next. Those costs are real. But you do not become the person you were before the experience happened. Imagine someone who spends 5 years building a business that eventually closes. Financially, they may have to rebuild. Maybe they lost money. Maybe the business never reached the level they expected. Maybe they have to go back to employment for a while. From the outside, somebody might say they are starting over. But are they really starting from zero? They now know more about customers. They understand marketing better. They have made pricing mistakes. They know which expenses were unnecessary. They may understand sales, cash flow, operations, customer service, competition, and pressure in a way they could not have understood from reading about business. The business may have ended. The education did not. The same thing can happen with a career. You can leave an industry and still carry communication skills, leadership experience, discipline, technical knowledge, problem solving, and professional relationships into whatever comes next. A relationship can end, and you can carry forward clearer boundaries, better communication, and a better understanding of what you need. A failed routine can teach you what kind of environment does not work for you. A bad financial decision can teach you what questions to ask before spending again. A mistake can become information if you are willing to study it. Starting over may reset the situation. It does not erase the person who went through it. You are not starting from zero. You are starting from experience. And that distinction matters. Because when you believe you are going back to zero, starting again feels like losing everything. When you recognize that you are carrying knowledge forward, the restart begins to look different. One reason people struggle to start over is something known as the sunk cost effect. The basic idea is simple. Once we have invested enough time, money, energy, or emotion into something, we can feel pressure to continue simply because we have already invested so much. You have probably experienced this in smaller situations. You order food you do not really like, but you keep eating because you paid for it. You start watching a movie you are not enjoying, but you finish it because you already watched an hour. Now apply that same thinking to bigger decisions. I have already spent 4 years in this career. We have already been together for 8 years. I already spent this much money on the business. I already bought all this equipment. I already went to school for this. I already moved here. I already told everybody this is what I was going to do. Those facts matter. You should not ignore them. But there is an important question people often forget to ask. If I had not already invested all of that, would I choose this path today? Think about that. If you were standing at the beginning today, with everything you currently know, would you still choose it? If the answer is yes, maybe the path still deserves your effort. If the answer is no, then you need to understand why. Past investment should be part of your evaluation, but it should not automatically control your future. The money already spent is already spent. The years already lived are already lived. You cannot recover them by sacrificing more years to something that no longer makes sense. Sometimes people spend another 5 years trying to justify the first 5. At that point, they are no longer protecting an investment. They are multiplying the cost. The decision in front of you is about what happens next. That does not mean quitting every time something becomes difficult. Difficulty is not proof that you are on the wrong path. Every worthwhile goal can become uncomfortable. But continuing only because of what you already invested can become its own trap. This is where we need balance. There is a difference between starting over because something genuinely needs to change and running away because things became uncomfortable. Sometimes you should stay. Sometimes you need patience. Sometimes you need better communication. Sometimes you need a different strategy. Sometimes you need more discipline. Sometimes you need to learn a skill you do not currently have. The problem is not always the career, relationship, business, goal, or environment. Sometimes the problem is your approach. So before you restart something important, ask yourself 5 questions. Question 1, is the problem temporary or structural? A temporary problem might be a difficult season. A bad month. One conflict. One customer. A short-term financial problem. A skill you have not learned yet. A structural problem goes deeper. The values do not match. The economics consistently do not work. The environment repeatedly damages you. The relationship depends on behaviors that neither person is willing to change. The career fundamentally conflicts with the life you want. The goal itself is no longer something you want. Do not treat a temporary problem like a permanent diagnosis. But also do not keep calling a structural problem just a rough patch for 5 years. Question 2, have I actually tried to repair the problem? Sometimes people say, this is not working. What they really mean is, this did not work immediately. Have you communicated? Have you changed the strategy? Have you asked for help? Have you learned the missing skill? Have you tested another approach? Have you given that adjustment enough time to produce evidence? There is a difference between something being difficult and something being wrong for you. You need enough evidence to know which one you are dealing with. Question 3, am I leaving because I have clarity, or because I want relief? This one matters. Relief says, I need this uncomfortable feeling to stop right now. Clarity says, I have looked at this carefully, and I no longer believe this is the right direction. Those can feel very similar in the moment. That is why major decisions made during intense emotion deserve extra thought. Sometimes what you need is not a new life. You need sleep. You need a conversation. You need a weekend away. You need help. You need to calm down enough to evaluate the situation without your emotions making the entire decision. Question 4. If conditions improved, would I still want this? If the salary increased, would you still hate the career? If the business became profitable, would you still want to run it? If the conflict disappeared, would you still want the relationship? If your workload became reasonable, would you still want to leave? If the answer is still no, pay attention. Sometimes what looks like a problem with conditions is actually a deeper problem with direction. Question 5. What evidence would convince me to stay? This can be revealing. What would actually need to change? What measurable improvement would tell you that continuing makes sense? If you cannot answer that question, you may already know where you stand. If nothing could realistically change your mind, then continuing to delay may simply be fear wearing the costume of patience. Starting over is not only difficult because of what you might lose. It is difficult because of what other people might think. You told everybody about the business. Now it closed. You told people this was your dream career. Now you want something else. You posted the relationship. Now it ended. You moved somewhere and told everybody it was going to be your fresh start. Now you want to move again. Maybe you went back to school and discovered you do not even want the career attached to the degree. That can create embarrassment. It can make you feel like everyone is watching. But there is an important question hiding underneath that fear. Am I living my life, or am I performing consistency for an audience? People change. Information changes. Circumstances change. Goals change. You learn things you did not know before. You experience things you could not have predicted. You are allowed to make a decision based on what you know now, even when it is different from what you believed 3 years ago. Consistency is valuable when you are consistently moving towards something worthwhile. Consistency becomes stubbornness when the evidence is telling you to change and you refuse because you do not want somebody to say, I told you so. Some people may judge you. They may misunderstand. They may call you inconsistent. They may even enjoy seeing you change direction because it makes them feel better about themselves. But here is what matters. You still have to live with the consequences of your decision long after they stop talking about it. They do not have to wake up in your life every morning. They do not pay the cost of you staying. Do not build a prison out of somebody else's opinion. There is another part of starting over that people sometimes skip. You may need to grieve what you thought your life was going to be. That deserves to be acknowledged. You may not only be losing a job. You may be losing the identity that came with it. You may not only be ending a relationship. You may be letting go of the future you imagine with that person. You may not only be closing a business. You may be releasing a dream you spent years talking about. You may not only be moving. You may be leaving behind the version of yourself that believed that place was going to become home. That can hurt even when you know the decision is right. You do not have to pretend you are excited about every restart. You can be grateful for what you learned and still be disappointed by how things ended. You can know something needs to end and still miss it. You can feel relief and grief at the same time. The important thing is not to confuse grief with evidence that you made the wrong decision. Missing something does not automatically mean you should go back to it. Sometimes it simply means it mattered to you. And when something mattered, letting it go can hurt. Give yourself enough honesty to acknowledge that without allowing the pain to make every decision for you. If you decide that a restart is necessary, do not emotionally burn everything down and pretend the past had no value. Extract the value first. Ask yourself, what did this chapter teach me? What skills did I gain? What mistakes do I never want to repeat? What relationships are worth keeping? What resources can I carry forward? What did I discover about myself? What warning signs did I ignore? What worked that I should keep? What did not work that I should leave? This is where starting over becomes different from repeating yourself. Because if you leave a bad situation but carry the exact same thinking, boundaries, habits, and decision-making process into the next one, you may have changed the scenery without changing the pattern. A new city does not automatically create a new life. A new relationship does not automatically create a healthier relationship. A new job does not automatically fix your work habits. A new business does not automatically fix poor financial decisions. A new year does not automatically create a new version of you. A restart becomes meaningful when the lessons come with you. Otherwise, you may simply recreate the same life with different names and locations.
If this episode is helping you look at starting over a little differently, take a second to like the video, subscribe to the Welz Project by clicking the subscribe button or going to the link in the description and set the notification bell to all. We're building these conversations around things you can actually apply to your life, and that support helps more people find them too. Now let's get back to the reset framework.
Here is a 5-part framework for starting over without throwing away the value of your past. We will call it reset. R. Reality. E. End what is actually over. S. Salvage the value. E. Establish the next direction. T. Take the smallest real step. R. Reality. Start with the situation as it actually is. Not what you hoped it would become. Not what it used to be. Not what other people think it should be. Ask yourself, what is working? What is not working? What have I been avoiding? What evidence do I have? What am I pretending not to know? What part of this situation am I protecting because of pride, fear, familiarity, or embarrassment? This step requires honesty. Reality is the foundation. You cannot make a good restart from a false diagnosis. If you lie to yourself about why something failed, you are more likely to carry the same problem into the next chapter. E. End what is actually over. Some chapters stay open because nobody is willing to admit they ended. You may still be emotionally negotiating with something that is already gone. Ending something does not always mean dramatic destruction. It can simply mean making a decision. Sending the resignation. Closing an account. Ending a subscription. Having the conversation. Removing the contact. Changing the schedule. Stopping the project. Writing down. I am no longer pursuing this goal. Sometimes people wait for closure as if somebody else has to hand it to them. But closure is not always a feeling. Sometimes closure is an action. You make the decision, and your emotions catch up later. S. Salvage the value. Before moving forward, inventory what the experience gave you. Write down your skills. Contacts. Lessons. Resources. Knowledge. Mistakes. Strengths you discovered. Weaknesses you exposed. Questions you now know to ask. Red flags you now recognize. This step changes the story. Instead of saying, I wasted 3 years. You may be able to say, I spent 3 years learning what I will and will not do next. That does not mean every painful experience was worth the pain. It does not mean everything happens for a reason. It means that since the experience already happened, you can refuse to leave the lesson behind. The pain may already be part of your story. The lesson is what you can still choose to take from it. Establish the next direction. Do not restart with only a list of what you do not want. I do not want this job. I do not want this relationship. I do not want to live here. I do not want to be broke. I do not want to feel like this anymore. That tells you what you are leaving. It does not tell you where you are going. Ask. What would better actually look like? What are my non-negotiables now? What do I value more than I did before? What kind of environment helps me perform well? What mistakes need safeguards? What resources do I need? What skill would make the next chapter stronger? What am I actually trying to build? Your next direction does not need to be a 10-year master plan. You do not need to know every step. You need enough clarity for the next meaningful move. Take the smallest real step. This is where people often get stuck. They create a huge picture of the new life, then become overwhelmed by the distance between where they are and where they want to go. Instead, ask. What is the smallest action that makes the restart real? Update the resume. Make the appointment. Create the budget. Apply to one position. Research one certification. Remove one trigger. Call one person. Save the first $100. Walk for 20 minutes. Write the first page. Make the first phone call. Cancel the thing you know needs to end. The first step does not need to transform your life. It needs to prove that the new direction is no longer only an idea. Imagine someone who has spent 10 years in a career they no longer want. They feel trapped because they have experience, benefits, seniority, and a predictable paycheck. Starting over feels irresponsible. Using reset, they begin with reality. They admit the work is draining them. But they also recognize that quitting tomorrow without a plan would create financial problems. Ending what is over does not necessarily mean immediately resigning. It may mean ending the belief that this has to be their forever career. That is an important distinction. You can emotionally decide that a chapter is ending before you financially leave it. Then they salvage the value. They list transferable skills. Management. Scheduling. Customer communication. Technical knowledge. Problem solving. Training employees. Managing pressure. Then they establish direction. Maybe they want another field where those skills transfer, but the work fits their life better. Finally, they take the smallest real step. One conversation with somebody in the new field. One certification. One application. 1 hour each night learning the next skill. Starting over can be gradual. You do not always have to destroy your current stability to begin building the next chapter. Sometimes the smartest restart is a bridge, not a jump. Now imagine someone leaving a long relationship. They may feel like they lost years. The restart may involve rebuilding routines, friendships, finances, confidence, and even their sense of identity. A common mistake would be immediately searching for another person to fill every empty space. A stronger approach is to ask what the relationship revealed. Where were the boundaries weak? What needs were ignored? What communication patterns failed? What did I tolerate because I was afraid to be alone? What warning signs did I explain away? What qualities genuinely worked? What do I need to do differently next time? Then the next relationship is not simply another attempt. It is an attempt made with more information. Pain does not automatically create wisdom. Pain creates an opportunity to learn. Wisdom requires reflection. That is the part you have control over. Starting over can make you feel behind. You may look at someone your age who appears established while you are rebuilding. They bought the house. Their career is moving. Their business is growing. Their relationship looks stable. They seem to know exactly what they are doing. Meanwhile, you are changing industries, rebuilding savings, moving, learning, separating, recovering, or trying again. Comparison can turn a strategic restart into shame. But you rarely know the full cost of another person's timeline. You see the result. You do not always see the debt, the stress, the relationship problems, the mistakes, the sacrifices. You also do not know what they may need to restart later. Life is not one synchronized race where everybody reaches the same milestones at the same time. Sometimes the decision that makes you look behind for 2 years puts you in a much better position 10 years later. The goal is not to have the cleanest timeline. The goal is to build a life that actually fits. When you start over, confidence may be low because the previous chapter did not end the way you wanted. Do not wait for confidence to magically return. Build evidence. Keep small promises. If you say you will apply to 3 jobs, apply to 3. If you say you will walk every morning, walk. If you say you will stop contacting someone, protect that boundary. If you say you will save a certain amount, track it. If you say you will study for 30 minutes, study. Confidence grows when your actions start becoming evidence that you can rely on yourself again. A lot of people try to rebuild confidence by speaking differently to themselves. That can help. But eventually your mind wants evidence. Give it evidence. Do not make 20 promises. Make a few that matter. Then keep them. Your restart does not need a dramatic announcement. It needs consistency. If you know there is an area of your life that may need a restart, try this for the next 30 days. Week 1, Clarity. Write down what you are leaving, why you are leaving it, and what the experience taught you. Separate facts from emotion. What happened? What worked? What stopped working? What do you know now that you did not know when you started? Week 2, Cleanup. Remove unnecessary triggers, obligations, expenses, contacts, clutter, or routines connected to the old direction. That could mean cleaning a room, canceling expenses, changing your schedule, removing reminders, organizing your finances, creating boundaries. Sometimes the next chapter has no room because the old one is still occupying everything. Week 3, Construction. Build one new routine that supports the next direction. It might be studying, saving, exercising, networking, creating, applying, practicing. Do not try to rebuild your entire life in 7 days. Build one structure that supports where you are trying to go. Week 4, Evidence. Review what you actually did. Not what you planned. Not what you posted. Not what you intended. What did you do? What worked? What needs adjustment? What should continue for the next 30 days? This gives you something more useful than temporary motivation. It gives you evidence. And evidence gives you something to build on. Failure is not simply ending something. Sometimes failure would be knowing something is destroying your future and staying because you are afraid of embarrassment. Sometimes success is having the courage to say, "This worked for a season, but it no longer works for me. I made the wrong decision. I learned what I needed to learn. I need a different strategy. I need help. I am going back to the beginning. I am trying again." There is strength in persistence. There is also strength in correction. Wisdom is knowing which one the situation requires. And you may not always get that decision perfectly right. That is part of being human. The goal is not to become somebody who never makes the wrong choice. The goal is to become somebody who can recognize reality, learn, adjust, and keep moving.
Here's what I want you to do after this episode. Choose an area of your life that feels stuck. Do not immediately decide that you need to quit. Instead, answer these questions. If I were choosing today, knowing everything I know now, would I still choose this? Is the problem temporary or is it structural? Have I honestly tried to repair it? Am I staying because I still believe in it or because I'm afraid of what starting over would look like? What have I learned that I could carry into the next chapter? What would I leave behind? What is the smallest step I could take toward a better direction? Take your time with those questions. You may discover that you don't need a complete restart. You may need a conversation, a boundary, a new strategy, a new skill, a break, more patience, more discipline. Or you may realize that you have been keeping something alive long after it stopped being right for you. Either answer is useful if it's honest. The purpose of reflection is not to convince yourself to leave. It is to stop moving through your life on autopilot. Starting over is scary because it forces you to admit that the future may look very different from the plan you originally made. But changing direction does not erase your progress. The lessons come with you. The skills come with you. The experience comes with you. The clarity comes with you. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stop asking how much you already invested and start asking what the next 5 years will cost if nothing changes. You do not have to hate your past to outgrow it. You do not have to call everything a mistake to choose something different. You do not need everybody to understand why you changed your mind. You need enough honesty to recognize when the current path no longer deserves another year of your life. And if the current path still does deserve your effort, then knowing that consciously can give you a stronger reason to stay and work on it. Either way, make the decision from clarity, not embarrassment, not pressure, not fear of what someone else might think. So here's the question I want you to answer in the comments. What part of your life would you be willing to start over if you knew starting over did not mean starting from zero? Share only what you're comfortable sharing. It takes something to talk publicly about personal decisions, and your perspective may help somebody else realize that they're not alone. If this episode gave you something useful to think about or apply, like the video and subscribe to the Welz Project so you don't miss the next conversation. I'm Welz. This is the Welz Project. Challenge ideas, not people. Think deeper, live better. Truth, growth, resources, real talk. See you next time. Peace and love.